Good afternoon, brothers, and welcome to the 5th episode of Pod Kappa Tau, the podcast about anything and everything Phi Kappa Tau. You know what? I just got to come out and say it. It is a great week to be a Phi Tau. You want to know why? I'll tell you why. It's Conclave Week. That's right. It's the biannual Phi Tau homecoming this week to great old Oxford, Ohio, and I personally am stoked. I've never been to a conclave, but I am excited to see how it goes and to share in the traditions of Phi Kappa Tau, which have been rooted here in Oxford, Ohio, with all my fellow brothers. Today, we sit down with my current boss, the Associate Director of Organizational Growth, Mr. Darryl Thompson, to talk about diversity and inclusion in Phi Kappa Tau, what Phi Tau looks for when we go to expand to different colleges, and how alumni can get involved with not only these respective expansions, but also future expansions if you're looking to bring your chapter back if it has closed. Enjoy. Now here I have with me someone who is my boss, Mr. Darryl Thompson. Darryl, how you doing today?
I'm hanging in there. Can't complain.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to have you on the show.
Glad to be here.
So you joined Phi Tau later as well. This will be back-to-back weeks. We had a member of our staff who joined Phi Tau in your junior year, correct?
Yes, sir.
What kind of led you to not join a fraternity at first, and then talk about what brought you to join Phi Tau?
Yeah, for me, I think my freshman year, going back to my senior year of high school and for sure my freshman year, I had just some misconceptions about what fraternity is and what it means to be a fraternity man. It also didn't help that I unfortunately met some bad apples my first year of college that kind of personified some of the stereotypes that I had envisioned. So for me, it was less about building that brotherhood and as our tagline says, developing from a man of character to a man of distinction. It was more so I saw fraternities as just a social outlet, not so much the professional development side of it, which is what I was seeking. So my junior year, actually, my best friend lived with Phi Tau's recruitment chair, and we had a lot of deep talks about our expectations for college and life after. And I realized that a lot of my viewpoints aligned with his, as well as a few of the other brothers in the chapter. So I, funny enough, was recruited without knowing I was being recruited, and really just resonated with, the guys at the Gamma Tau chapter at Old Dominion, which led to me joining in the fall of 2013.
Do you remember your badge number?
It is 92123.
Dang, we're a lot closer than I thought we would be.
Yeah.
So one of the things, just I know from obviously knowing you, you also were looking at NPHC organizations as well. Just talk a little bit about what it's like being a black man in a fraternity system, the system as a whole being IFC that has been predominantly white.
In a word, interesting. I think much like I had misconceptions around fraternity as a whole, I think there was a lot of preconceived notions I had about an IFC fraternity specifically, in different ways, and a lot of those walls came down once I got the chance to know the guys, at least from my chapter. But I definitely think it's a welcome experience, being around a lot of different people who don't necessarily look like you or grew up in the same way that you did. I think there's a lot of education that goes on. Me learning from my peers who are different races, different socioeconomic statuses as I am, and vice versa. I think I was very lucky in the sense that I went to a university that is incredibly diverse. So I wasn't recruited in the sense that, he could be, kind of our token, so to speak. I don't think there was any one race that was really prevalent in our chapter, and we had a ton of diversity, and we really looked beyond race as to why our chapter was diverse. So looking at different reasonings for recruiting someone, it never was, we need another African American male. It was always, a niche that we needed to fill that was filled for a plethora of reasons.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's a good recruitment strategy for all chapters, not just, Gamma Tau. And you and I just came back from the Colorado Leadership Academy session where one of the big points that we do talk about is diversity and inclusion. Is that something that you like to see more so on the forefront of what we teach at these leadership academies?
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly important. I think that's one of the big things that attracted me to Phi Kappa Tau as an undergrad, because I saw that diversity in this group of men, not only from, as we talked about, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, but I think the diversification of ideas is what makes our chapters great. And I think that across the country, there are a lot of chapters very similar to Old Dominion's group that are incredibly diverse, incredibly inclusive, and don't put up too many barriers to entry in order to be a Phi Tau. I think that's one of the great things about this fraternity, that, you know, there's no true mold that we're looking to fit. It's more so, are you about personal betterment and how you can attain that within this group and help this group grow? So I think the diversity and inclusion is important to talk about, because I think unintentionally a lot of our chapters do it, but being more aware of what they're doing helps us be more inclusive, not only within our chapters, but within the entire Greek system and beyond that bubble to our campuses and communities.
That's one of the things that I'd say as well, is even just from, you know, the national perspective of that, we see, you know, more and more as the generations keep coming up, and each year like gets new men coming in, you see, you know, more diversity, more open-mindedness, more acceptance of everything. And I think that that's really prevalent, especially in Phi Tau's case, that, like you said, a lot of our chapters are very diverse. And I think that that's something that all Phi Tau chapters should strive for, and I think do strive for.
Absolutely.
And, you know, kind of talking about the mold of different things, you yourself have kind of molded yourself into Phi Tau after you joined your junior year. Then after that, you were an intern here for a year, and then you eventually got hired by the executive offices. Kind of talk about your time as an intern, and then also your time as a recruiter in my role.
Yeah. Fun times, interesting times, challenging times. I interned in the summer of 2015, and then joined staff the following summer and spent the next 2 years as a recruiter. So, you know, my first professional job out of college, as with anyone, presents its own unique set of challenges and definitely a lot of great memories. And I think I was incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to work for Phi Kappa Tau, because I think the learning curve is a little bit adjusted here. I think, you know, this office is a great first job environment. You have the opportunity to make mistakes, and that's something I was really looking for, because I was very aware that I wasn't going to be perfect year one on the job, and I definitely can attest to the amount of growth that I've made as a professional, having worked for Phi Tau for going into now my 4th year. I think the biggest thing that I can take away from the internship experience is truly and finally understanding the national scope of this fraternity. I think some of the closer friends that I made that year, none of them live on the East Coast. Quite a few people that I met, whether it was Leadership Academy, Conclave, other summer programs that we host as a national organization, many of them that I'm still close with today, a lot of them that I haven't seen in years. So it's really cool to truly finally understand what it means to be part of a national fraternity. And I think that summer as an intern really put that in perspective. And I think that really influenced my decision to come back as a recruiter, because now I got an opportunity to create that for a new campus and a new group of young men.
Yeah, I agree. I think that working for the executive offices, like you said, has opened up my eyes as well. I mean, you kind of get the sense of things as an undergrad if you go to regional conference or leadership academy, but, you know, once you're actually working here, seeing what goes on with a national fraternity, as well as, you know, like you said, conclave convention, making those connections, meeting those people, I think it's really cool to see just that we're all connected by one simple thing of the fact that we're all brothers, which is really cool to me to see. And the other question that I wanted to ask about, you know, your time as a recruiter, some of the other recruiters have already been on. They've shared their favorite stories from the road. What is your favorite story from the road?
Oh, boy. Man, that's a great question. So thinking back to my 2 years as a recruiter, I'd have to say one of the more fun stories that I can remember came from my days at the University of Wisconsin. Myself and two other recruiters, Quade Beesing and Nick Popejoy, were on that project together, and we're very fortunate to experience Madison. Recruited a very solid group of guys, and due to its proximity, we're able to actually take a weekend trip to Chicago for our Founders Day. So that was one of the more fun trips that I've been on as a recruiter. Anytime you put the three of us in a car or a room together, fun stories are afoot. So that was definitely quite the experience, and I think that's one of the coolest things about your role as a recruiter or any kind of traveling staff member. Definitely being able to take advantage of your time on the road and make some fun stops along the way. So Chicago was one of those stops while we were in Wisconsin, as well as Minneapolis for Super Bowl 47. Was it 47?
I thought it was 49 or 51, one of the two.
We'll go with that.
Okay.
So Super Bowl 51. So that was a pretty eye-opening experience. That's, to this day, still probably the farthest north I've ever been. And if I don't go back, I'll probably be okay.
I would not want to step foot in that cold either if I were you. Nor I am not jealous of the guys at Michigan Tech building ice castles, I'll tell you that.
I tell you what, they put a lot of effort into it, and they're really cool sculptures, but I think I'll be okay with sunny and 65.
I'm good with that too. And kind of talk about, some of the projects that you were on. I myself was on the real USC's project at Southern California. You were on the other USC at South Carolina, which was our biggest chartering, as well as our biggest colony or colonization in the history of Phi Tau. What went right on that project, as well as, what was the overall project like for you?
Yeah. So I'd say what went right, you got to say everything. You don't just build an 83-man colony in about 5.5 weeks and with bumps along the road. We really just were able to catch lightning in a bottle and found some really, really strong individuals that were incredibly determined to make some change on their campus. I think the need for fraternity at South Carolina is pretty great. And there are a lot of students who see fraternity, but they don't necessarily like what they see. So they've actually had several expansions in the last few years. But I know Phi Tau at South Carolina, our Zeta Xi chapter, is doing great things. And I think it all stems from, very open dialogue about what the expectation was. We were very upfront with them in the fact that, at the time, about a third of the active fraternities on that campus had been suspended. So just being upfront with the students, this isn't going to be an experience like any that you've seen on this campus before. We're really looking to make some waves here. And I think we had a really good group of men that were sophomores that really had an opportunity to dig their teeth into that chapter and really set the standard for what it means to be a Phi Tau at USC, the real USC, that is. And I think a lot of those guys actually just graduated. So shout out to the University of South Carolina class of 2019. Those guys made us proud. I know Nick and I were very excited to be there, both of us being Virginia guys. Able to go down to South Carolina. It was like home part 2 for us. And I think the biggest thing there was really an open set of expectations and a lot of guys who saw the need for something like Phi Tau on that campus.
And that led you into your current position now, the Associate Director of Organizational Growth. So if you want to talk about what you do in that role.
Yeah, so essentially my role now is to more so oversight of our expansion process. So no longer boots on the ground when it comes to expansion. That's now you and our other 3 recruiters. But I'm more so a resource for you guys, resource for our recruiters to bounce ideas off of, make sure that we can create another USC. But also a resource for our chapters. I work very closely with our Associate Director of Chapter Services, Brandon Lewis, when we identify a struggling chapter in terms of recruitment, making sure that we can develop some resources to aid them in their recruitment journey. And also, working with various campuses in terms of selecting, trying to figure out what the roadmap for Phi Tau looks like from an expansion lens for the next 2, 4, 10 years. And I'd say those are probably the 2 main aspects of my job: selecting campuses as well as helping be a resource for our expansion department.
And when you select those campuses, you do get to go on the road, go present to them and whatnot. So what exactly do we look for in a campus when we, give them the pitch of, hey, Phi Tau would be a really good fit here, we think?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we're looking for is a mutual fit. We don't want to be on a campus that doesn't want to have us, and we also don't want to go to a campus where we don't feel like we could be successful. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that. One of the biggest ones being, do we feel that we could create a chapter that would thrive on this campus and be able to shift the culture of the campus? If it's a campus with a struggling culture, we don't want to conform to that. We want to kind of help raise the bar. If it's a campus with a great culture, can we make it better? Can we find students who are going to want to become the next great fraternity on that campus? Also, from a size perspective, can we find a university where we won't have a colony or a chapter that struggles to get to the campus average? Housing is another big thing. Looking at campuses where there's not a need for a house, rather it's only an enhancement to the experience. We do have several colonies that are currently housed, and it just ended up being a great situation for that colony. But we don't want to be kind of pigeonholed into, well, you have to go to this campus this semester, that way you can get a house this semester and be relevant this semester. Because no 2 colonies are the same. We talked a lot about diversity earlier, and I think it's very true with our colonies. Very different in how they operate and how they come about. So we don't want to kind of create the same experience on multiple campuses when we know that, that's not the niche that they need to fill.
When it comes to housing, how does that mainly go about for the colonies? Is it mainly an alumni-driven thing?
Yeah. So our executive offices, we don't currently own any of the houses that our chapters operate out of. Those are all alumni-driven campaigns. We can certainly help with those campaigns, but that's something that's handled more so at a local level.
In the past 2 years, since my first year as a recruiter, and then as well as your last year as a recruiter, for the Power 5 conferences, that being the SEC, ACC, Pac-12, Big 12, and Big 10. Yes, I was forgetting that one. We have been to 8 schools, or that we have expanded to 8 schools in those Power 5 conferences. Do you think that that's a good thing for our organization, as well as do you see Phi Tau thriving on each of those campuses?
Yeah, I think it can be a great thing for this organization. We talked about diversity. I think it's great to be at a mix of campuses. That way at these programmings like Leadership Academy, Convention, Conclave, there's a diversification of ideas like we talked about. So I think it's great that we're going to big schools. I also think it's good for us to go to some smaller schools as well as the ones in between. As I said, we're really just looking for that fit when we select a campus. So if we feel we could be successful at a South Carolina, great. If we feel we could be successful at a smaller school like Columbus State down in Georgia, absolutely, we'll go there. I think the biggest thing isn't so much the name or the recognition. It's, are there men on that campus who align with the values that we're looking to build on that campus?
And one of the things talking about building that we've talked about as an office, I know since I've come on staff, is that there's this study of a bubble, that the college enrollment is basically a bubble and that it's going to pop soon, that they are projecting that numbers are going to go down for college enrollment, whether that be because of the debt or because people are finding jobs without a degree and that don't see it as necessary anymore. Is that something that we are trying to take advantage of and trying to get on the forefront of trying to potentially expand quickly before that bubble bursts, and then that way once the bubble bursts we can kind of take a step back and more so focus on helping these chapters through the chapter services team?
Yeah, I think it is kind of a two-edged sword, like you mentioned. We definitely want to make sure that we're able to be a resource for our existing chapters. We recently hired an additional success manager, but also because of the decline in enrollment across the country, I think we want to try to get ahead of that and create as many good chapters as we can before that decline, knowing that our acceptance rate in terms of getting to a campus is probably going to decline here in a couple years. But I think like you mentioned, the biggest thing is being there to support our existing chapters. That way we don't lose chapters because of the decline of enrollment, but we also don't want to stay stagnant. We want to continue to grow. So hoping that we can add more chapters as well before that decline is definitely a big piece of it.
One of the other big things about expanding to campuses are sometimes we'll have interest groups on these campuses. How does that kind of come into play in deciding if we go to a campus, and do interest groups ultimately make it easier for us to expand compared to us going to a campus that is just basically a cold start?
Yeah, I think interest groups help out a lot, especially in the expansion process. I think when working with university administration, they're all about supporting their existing students. Like we talked about being a resource for our existing chapters, they wouldn't want to bring on an additional chapter without feeling comfortable about their current groups. So in the case of an interest group, it's a group of students that we're looking to support. And we can support that group of students via expansion and helping them grow and be sustainable. So it definitely helps in that conversation with administration on a campus. And it also helps get a better feel for what that campus looks like from a cultural perspective. I think you can do all the research you want about what a campus's atmosphere is like, but you really don't know until you step foot and spend some time on that campus. And that's something that these students have done. So in terms of, like we talked about, finding that right fit, we get an opportunity to talk with these students and understand a little bit more of the landscape of a campus and determine whether or not it's somewhere that we want to be.
One of the things that I talked about on this past week's episode with Brandon was the new domain director system and how it works. And one of the charges that they are going to be tasked with is having regional alumni events, which seemingly are popping up more and more. There's a DC one in the spring. Now I think in a couple weeks there's one in New York he was talking about. Is that something that we ever try and do before we go to a campus, as well as gauge the alumni's interest, as well as potentially have an event trying to get them together and be like, hey, we can make this happen, just as long as we're going to need your help as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as we discussed, a big piece of the equation in our existing groups is support, not only from us at the national level, but also at the local level with our alumni, our BOGs, our graduate councils. So getting an opportunity to try to build that board before you even get to campus is huge. I know that there are several groups that we've recently started that actually was the case, that the board was actually built before the colony itself, and those groups are thriving because of that.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's the biggest piece, and that's been a recurring theme with most people that I've talked to on the show, is that alumni are huge. So under you, in your current position and by the end of your tenure, we will have brought back 4 single-letter chapters. How vital is that to our success as a national organization?
I think it's pretty big. You never like to see a group close, especially from our lens. We spend a lot of time and resources creating these colonies and helping get them to chartering. So it never is a fun thing to see a group close. So it's always, heartwarming to see them reopen. And having talked with some of these alumni from these groups that have been closed for so long, it's great to see the legacy continue on these campuses. And I think these alumni are incredibly engaged in the process, and incredibly responsible for us even having the opportunity to come back. And I know that excitement drives me in my daily job, because I want to create that feeling for another group of alumni somewhere.
Yeah, agreed. I've been on a couple expansions now where they've had boards already set in place. And I think, like you said, they're thriving. It certainly helps. Alumni definitely play a huge piece. And that lastly leads to the last question that I have for you is, how can alumni from schools that have had a chapter closed down, how can they get involved with, trying to bring their chapter back, as well as, maybe expediting the process of us expanding there, or, setting up the board? How can they get involved?
Yeah, the biggest thing is, that's another avenue for an easy expansion for us. Having students on a campus is one way to really be able to get a foot in the door, but having an alumni group that's dedicated is also another huge component of that. So we've been trying to identify some of those groups, and I think there are definitely some success stories of alumni reaching out saying, hey, I want to start my chapter again, and it happening. Prime example of that, the University of Michigan will be expanding there this fall, and 2 of their alumni reached out to me last summer. I had conversations with the staff at the University of Michigan, and about 3 months we had the approval to expand. So I think that is a huge piece, because that's something that a fraternity and sorority life coordinator is really looking for, is how are these students going to be supported? And as we mentioned, a lot can be done here at the national level, but locally we need some dedicated alumni to help guide these young men through this journey that, they've never embarked on before. There isn't anybody on these campuses without chapters that is a Phi Tau that can help them understand what it means to be a Phi Tau. So that's why they need some alumni or volunteers locally in order to help that. And I think talking with administration on campuses, that's something they really appreciate, is the dedication of our local volunteers, especially without a chapter. So seeing that helps make my job a little bit easier, especially when those alumni have those connections in certain offices, whether it's knowing a dean of students, someone on the faculty within the student life department. That's definitely something that can help kind of sway the conversation in a direction that we want it to go.
Well, Darryl, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been great talking to you and getting to know a little bit more about our processes with what we look for in a campus, how we expand, stuff like that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, anytime.
That's it for episode 5. I hope you all enjoyed getting a little bit of insight into his position. Like we said earlier, it is Conclave Week, and I hope to see a record number of brothers come to Conclave this year to see Phi Tau's roots that were dug in here in Oxford only 113 years ago. Also, please do not forget, please, 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 sign up your Chapter's 2 representatives for Leadership Academy for the Georgia session. You still have time. That'll close here in a couple weeks. Conclave registration is unfortunately closed. However, I do hope again to see a lot of you come out. Thanks again for listening. Have a great week, and remember to tune in next Monday when we interview the Director of Education, Jess Schabel. Although I also will plug this. Next week, later on during the week, there will be a Conclave special episode where we get to sit down and interview a multitude of undergraduate brothers and see what's going on around the country in our Phi Tau chapters.
We are brothers now and ever, until the day we die. And when that time comes rolling round, and we bid our last goodbye, there is one thing sure and certain. Let us bow our heads in awe. We'll